Those who viewed me as nothing more than an animal were irritated by Paul's actions. They became more hostile toward me, sometimes coming into my room to disturb me with their anger. The details are rather doleful, and I would rather not bother with them. However, many of those who were aggressive toward me were the ones who would operate on me, vivisect me, things of equally unnerving natures. My right arm. I am told it was an accident, but I have always suspected otherwise. I cannot move it above shoulder height, or I am crippled with pain. Even lifting it halfway is mildly discomforting. A terrible accident during an examination indeed. The ones who began to enjoy my company, namely the lesser staff members such as chefs, the janitors, the maids, would stop and converse with me from time to time. They frequently expressed their discontent with how I was treated, but I always dismissed their concerns. Of course, there were also those who remained indifferent toward me. They were thrilled by the scientific adventure I presented. Nothing more. Most years passed by in blurs, so I only remember that in 1987 they created a working anesthetic. The surgeries and examinations became more intense and harder to recover from. Then, 12 years later, Paul passed away, and my rights as a person went with him. As I was slowly being seen as a monster again, I began to act the part. I would growl or snarl when startled, whimper when in pain. I am uncertain whether I spoke for the years between 1999 and 2004, when I finally became a person in the eyes of those researchers once more. I know that sometime around 1995, they built a room for me, a room where I could farm again, with a synthetic sun. But, oh, there must be something left to tell you. Yes, I am vaguely aware of a period of time in which I went mad. It was shortly after Paul passed away, and my treatment altered severely. I received one feeding a day, taken down from 3, of some horrid matter I am uncertain was even natural. Due to the terrible food, I felt ill and starved, groaning all the time that I required a day with full meals of meat, vegetables, and fruit. My body was deprived, and I was warning them of what might happen if I went too long with such neglect. They seemed more intrigued than anything, studying my new behaviors. These men and women who dressed so neatly also began to act as though I was an animal. I was never spoken to directly, only spoken of in the third person. The books, record player, and photographs of my family and friends were confiscated. They were replaced with skulls, chains, and cauldrons, things they thought a demon would be satisfied with in an attempt to recreate my natural habitat. As though I am from some realm of endless cruelty and torture. It was enough to drive an insane man sane, likewise for the reverse. Tests were done on me more often than I could bear. On some days, I would undergo 3 separate procedures that left my body feeling bruised, my sheets blood-stained, and my body so heavily covered with stitches and scars that I looked like a new interpretation of old horrors, zombies and other such creations of madmen. If I recall correctly, they were cutting at the base of one of my horns when my mind snapped. I threw surgical tools, tables, people, roaring like a monster. I remember the rage I felt, the fear. It enveloped and controlled me so that I attacked everything in sight. I ran to what I knew was an exit to the outside world, throwing my fists at it in a fury. In my mind, I know I was screaming for someone outside to come in and help me. One of the people I had called friend, perhaps, or maybe one of my brothers. It was beyond my comprehension at the time to understand that not one soul who cared would hear my desperate cries or be in any position to rescue me. I was the only person who cared, and I was the only one who had a scrap of hope to save myself. What halted my rampage was my own foolishness. Blinded by my emotions, I forgot my permanently injured right arm. So, while banging at that door, my right arm did the impossible, moving straight upward. I was on the ground, writhing, before I understood what had happened. From there, I believe that I was dragged back to what could only be called my prison. I curled in on myself in the middle of the floor, shut my eyes against the hideous room, and dreamt of my old home, with the sweet, warm summers tending to the chickens and hiding behind the cornfield, while I wept myself to sleep. That was just a decade ago, the year after the turn of the millennium. 18 years after you stopped calling, mused Robert distantly. Corey frowned. What is the significance of that? Oh, nothing. I'm sorry. Please continue. I am afraid that there is nothing left to tell, replied Corey slowly. He sighed heavily. Although I did enjoy this appointment and conversing with you. Robert shook his head, finding himself defiant. He wanted to hear that this long, dark tale had a wonderful ending, but he understood that it did not. It ended where he was sitting across from Corey, in silence. Robert had to swallow back his tears, forcing a smile for Corey. Well, you're here now. Corey laughed quietly, eyes still distant. Yes, I suppose I am. Robert watched him for a moment, waiting for his eyes to return to the present. After what felt like an eternity, Robert cleared his throat quietly. Corey started, looking around himself urgently. Are you all right? Asked Robert, concerned for his dear friend. They had gone deep, deeper than the pain of the NSISD, to the inaccessible joy of his youth. Corey took a moment, but nodded. Yes, I will be fine, Robert. I just need time to think. Would it be fine to continue this next time? Robert nodded slowly, smiling slightly. We can continue next visit, of course. I have only one question, however. Ask it, was Corey's swift reply, though Robert thought he saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Can you allow the actuality that none of this is your fault, that there is nothing that you could have done to deserve anything you just told me? Asked Robert, recognizing the self-blame in the demon's expression. Corey sighed heavily, and Robert watched him process. The atmosphere was heavy while he waited patiently, frowning as he lost track of the slight ticks and pauses in Corey's face. Outside, the world was beginning to change to twilight, while inside, Robert wondered if the sun could ever rise again. Finally, the silence was broken. Yes, I can. Corey nearly laughed, and Robert could practically see the weight lifting from his shoulders as he relaxed. Robert laughed as well. Good, because none of it could have been. Nothing but the best and brightest moments, Corey. Remember that. I will, Robert. Thank you, replied Corey, with the brightest smile Robert had ever witnessed. He understood why his family held him so dear, just in finally seeing the smile that Kate had struggled to describe time and time again. The warmth, the joy, the freedom that he expressed was a treasure. And for a moment, Robert had to pause and wonder how, when the time came, he could ever let Corey go. Caitlin returned home from the park with Kyle and Sarah after dark, smiling as they ran off to get ready for bed without prompting. Corey was nowhere on the first floor, and she went upstairs as she began to worry. Where was he? He shouldn't be out right now. When she entered the bedroom, she found him sitting on the bed, staring at something in his hand. Funny, isn't it? all of this time, all of the years in captivity and demands for why, and it was all because of one tiny little ring. A little piece of metal, that's all. He laughed, the sound ringing with bitterness. Kate could not move. Corey? He looked up at her then, tears filling his eyes. He trembled, hand curling protectively around the ring he held. Kate, I'm sorry. For my theatrics with the proposal, for never fighting hard enough, for forgetting. I never meant any of that, Kate. I never wanted you to endure any of that, and I'm sorry I could not be more for you. I'm sorry, Kate. I love you. I love you. She stared at him for a moment, struggling to understand just what he was saying. It wasn't your fault, Corey. None of it was your fault. Perhaps not, he sighed heavily, standing to go pull her into a warm embrace. I'm sorry, all the same. I yearn for anything that can give you back everything you had stripped away. And I am so very sorry that there is nothing with that power. I'm sorry that I was too thick to understand that I needed to keep calling. I'm sorry that I never had the chance to meet Charlie. For everything, Kate, I'm sorry. Kate gasped quietly, eyes watering. Oh, God. It's you, isn't it? He nodded, holding her tighter. It's me. I'm here. I'm back. I'm home. Kate, I'm finally home. She wept silently, holding on to the demon for dear life. It's you. It's you. It's me. I'm here. I'm here. I'll never go again, I promise. I'll never let any of you slip away again, he swore, gently pulling Kate away just enough that he could see her face. Never again. She stared at him for a long moment before kissing him deeply. She laughed again when they broke apart, tears running down her cheeks. It is you. You're here. Corey laughed quietly. I am. Robert kept saying that you might never remember everything he said. She stopped herself, taking in the befuddled but happy expression on her demon's face. When was he telling you this? He asked. Kate considered a fib for a moment before realizing it. Corey was home. The man she remembered, that was who she was talking to, who was standing in front of her. She could tell him anything. Since you were released, I founded the groups that protested for demon rights. After his first visit with you, he made a few guesses, contacted me, and we've been communicating ever since, she explained, feeling a hint of guilt for having kept this from him. But he could not recall a thing up until now. He had to be treated more delicately. Corey just laughed again, louder and more freely as he uncurled his fingers and held the ring up to see. That sounds like you, making me earn your time. I don't suppose you would be opposed to wearing this again, until a proper marriage can be arranged. Kate grinned in spite of the years they had lost, and the years she could feel catching up to her. She shook her head, holding out her hand for him to slip the ring onto. I love you. June 21st, 1983. I can't sleep. I haven't slept in 3 days. I know I should, but I just can't. Charlie keeps asking me what's wrong, while Eleanor and Will know. They're the ones who told me that he's dead. I can't think his name. I don't want to remember his face. It's cruel, but I want to forget I ever knew him. I think it might be easier than being able to remember how good he was. Oh, God, I can't. I can't think that I can't even imagine his face without a smile or his eyes without care. All of it is impossible. No one wants to hold a service, either. After all, the government won't give us his body to lay to rest. It would only be an empty coffin. But it's better than letting him go unceremoniously. I need that closure. I need to see it all, to be able to have an opportunity to let go. I need to know that I'll never see him again. If only that were true. I still have the pictures, the books, the albums, his entire room, all of it to remind me what's wrong. Everything in this town reminds me of everything that is far from right. Nothing could ever be right. Not when Corey's dead.